Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today at the Quality of Life Innovations Scholars Panel discussion and Q&A session. I'm Juliet Tarantino, Senior QLI Manager at WISE, and I'm very happy to see many familiar names signed in. I'm joined by Phyllis Perillo, Founder, CEO, and President of WISE.
Thank you, Juliet.
All right, thank you, Phyllis. And it's now my pleasure to welcome Winona Liu, 2019 QLI first place winner for her project, The Effects of Mindfulness, Meditation on Memory and Mood. She's a graduate of Staten Island Technical High School and currently a first-year student at MIT. We're also joined by Samantha SaintJour, 2018 QLI first place winner for her project, Virtual Care Packages for Youth Aging Out of the Foster Care System. She's a graduate of James Madison High School and a senior at Brooklyn College. We also have with us Swarnav Pujari, 2014 QLI first place winner for his project, Solving the Energy Crisis One Step at a Time, graduate of Yorktown High School and the University of Illinois, founder and CEO of Touchlight Innovations, and currently head of growth at Gaiascope and a partner at Impact Climate Group. Panelists, as Phyllis mentioned, your projects are all so inspiring, and we're really honored to have you join us today. So we'll see all of our panelists now. You can have your cameras on. And I'll ask that you share your responses to this first question in order of introduction. Winona, Samantha, and Swarnav, how do you feel about your QLI experience? And explain how it made a difference.
Oh, hello, I'm Winona. I hope all of you guys are doing well. My experiment was on the impact of mindfulness meditation on memory and mood, and it was specifically short-term memory. So we found that there was, well, my partner and I found that there was statistical significance for mood. So mindfulness meditation did improve mood, and there was a positive trend for short-term memory. So after realizing this, we funded a portable meditation kit that is now sitting in the library and hopefully helping students at Staten Island Technical High School relax, and we hope that made a difference.
Samantha?
All right, so I wasn't sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Samantha. You guys can call me Sammy. As Juliet mentioned, my project was on helping youth aging out the foster care system basically find the resources that's needed for them. I had a friend who aged out the foster care system from my dance team, and it's like she went ghost. We couldn't find her anywhere because she didn't have a home. She didn't have a cell phone. She didn't have any way for us to reach her. And it's scary thinking that one of your best friends is out in the world by themselves with nothing. So in response to this, I actually came up with an app that kind of gives them all the resources they need in one click. You know how everything is easier virtually, and foster youth, I think, need it more than anyone else. With QLI and my experience with QLI, it was life-changing for me. At first, it felt like a lot of pressure, especially at my school. When I went to James Madison High School, our teacher was like, you know, nobody from James Madison has won in years. And I'm like, well, you know, ouch. So it was definitely a lot of pressure at first, but once you get the hang of it and you really fall in love with your topic, it becomes easy. It becomes something you're invested in. And that's what I hope for all of you
guys. Hey everyone, name is Swarnav. I'm excited to be here and excited to hear about at least some of your guys' projects in the breakout rooms. In terms of how I feel about my QLI experience, it was really transformational for me in just trying to learn how to get from a point of having an idea and getting it out there into the world and testing it. And I think the importance of bringing structure in to thinking about ideas that can help a lot of people is probably the most valuable thing that I was able to take away from QLI. As Juliet mentioned, I was working on a project that was in the climate space. I was developing these floor tiles that people could walk on or drive on to generate electricity. And when I came into the QLI program, and likely where you guys are at in the ideation stage and trying to figure out how you can implement these projects, I was all over the place. I had big ideas as to where I wanted to put things, and I want these tiles installed everywhere. And how could I go about testing this, or even in the first place, build it? QLI really helped me go through that process of thinking about, okay, what can we do? What's that next step going to be like? And that's helped me all through life to where I'm at today. And I imagine it's going to be a continuous lesson for me as I continue to go forward. And I credit a lot of the general skills as to how to think about ideas and how to get them out there into the world. I accredit all of that knowledge and experience to QLI. So not only has it given me an opportunity to bring ideas out there into the world and see if they can have an impact. And fortunately, in my case, I was able to through a company I started, but it's also been hugely valuable just to me from a personal perspective.
Thank you for sharing your experiences, panelists. This round beginning with Samantha and thinking back to when you were in our current QLI students' shoes, describe one aspect of working on the QLI project that was challenging and one aspect that was especially satisfying.
So to piggyback off of what Swarnav was saying, if I had to choose like a specific section that had me like, oh my God, it was definitely the implementation, especially since when you start off your project, sometimes, or when you sign up for WISE, maybe it's like, okay, this is just another paper. Wrong. You're like making a difference. You're taking action. And that's what makes WISE so different from any type of program, because they're encouraging you to take actual steps towards what you want to achieve. So it was really difficult to see how my idea could be implemented in such a realistic way. Because like Swarnav was saying, you'll have all these huge ideas. You know what? Yes, this is going to be implemented worldwide, and it's like, it may not start off with that. But what I found satisfying actually was that WISE tells you like, it's okay to take baby steps first. You can't achieve everything overnight. I feel like WISE kept us, kind of on the ground, down to earth with that. Like, it's okay if your idea is not done by the end of your project, or if the world hasn't changed by the time your project is done. So if you're stressed about your implementation stage right now, trust me, I feel like we've all probably been there with our projects. But in the end, just remember, it'll work out. It may not work out as big as you want it to, but as long as you're taking the steps to get there, who knows, maybe in a few years, you'll end up an entrepreneur running your own business. Call. So just stay confident and don't stress too much about implementation, I would say.
Swarnav?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm going to piggyback off of Samantha now too. But in terms of the biggest challenge and what makes it satisfying is actually getting through those challenges. And that's probably just a standard thing you hear from everyone. And it takes a lot to just constantly process that. I can attest to having to relearn that same exact statement almost every day of life. Because one of the biggest challenges I faced during my project time is, where am I going to test these tiles that I was hacking together in the basement? And when you have ambitious ideas like what Winona had, what Samantha had, and what I'm sure all of you guys have, the biggest challenge is, okay, well, the building part sounds like the complex part, but many times you'll find, how do I get this out there into the world so that people can actually try it? And it's in those kind of situations where you have to start to develop new skills, trying to find out, hey, how can I actually help people? How can I convince them and make the project feasible for them to implement? in my case, there was no way I was going to take these tiles and install them in Times Square. There was no way that I could have done something of that nature. But being able to demonstrate that inside of my high school at the bottom of a stairwell was more than enough to just prove that, hey, this is a concept that may have an impact if scaled up. And it's trying to understand what it is that you can bite off today, and getting through that entire process of implementation that I found particularly challenging, and then consequently significantly satisfying with the help of Phyllis and the entire team. So I think that's the implementation part, I think, is where most of the joy comes from, that you'll find when you're reflecting back, because I can attest to it being excessively stressful when you're in the mud actually trying to get through this.
Yeah, I definitely agree that the implementation, I would say, is the most important and satisfying part of this project, because it's the whole point of the competition, to improve someone's quality of life. But another challenging part for me was the data analysis of it. I had 100 participants, and denaming all of that data, making sure you were following ethics and analyzing that was challenging. And another section was the public speaking aspect, because I had never done like a real presentation in front of judges, and I just felt I was under a lot of pressure, but it was a great learning experience. And now, you look back at it a few years later and you have that paper and you feel accomplished just looking at it. You could always go back, read it. Yeah.
Thank you for those comments. And now for what students are on the edge of their seats to hear, panelists, and we'll begin with Swarnav this round. What advice would you give to QLI students working on a project today?
I think to summarize it all into one, because there's small little lessons you'll learn across the entire process, which the only way you're going to learn is by doing it. So you're doing 90% of the job right there, is always ask one more question than you think you need to ask. One of the things that was instrumental for me was, when you have these ideas, your mind's running at like 50 miles an hour. You're thinking about this, you want to do this, you're already at the finish line in your mind. So many times it might distract you from focusing very much in to the experience of the people that are helping you implement, or the person you're talking with at that time. So always asking one more question than you think you need to ask may give you a little bit extra context or information that can help you better improve, and as the name alludes to, the quality of life of the individuals you're trying to help, or the community you're trying to help. And just that little bit of context has served me exceptionally well. So I think that's one of the big takeaways, or I guess overarching pieces of advice I would share with all of you today.
Samantha?
One piece of advice I would give is to use all the resources that you have available to you. And I say this because for me, I actually worked on my project by myself, and a lot of other people were in teams, so I was already intimidated because, two minds are better than one, or even 3 or 4. I forgot what the max is, but I was like, how much can I really come up with by myself? How much can I do by myself? And that is one part of imposter syndrome. I feel like we might have all gone through that during our projects. Like, can I really accomplish this? But I realized I'm not really by myself. First of all, you have all these amazing, amazing teachers and mentors to look to, and they'll really give you advice, help, feedback if you ever need it, like quick as an email. But also for me, for my project specifically, I decided to use an app for my implementation. And I don't know anything about technology. I'm the farthest from a tech student. I don't know anything about tech, but I have a brother who does. So it was my brother who really helped me learn how to, navigate the app, how to create the app, how to go through that. And when you think about your project at first, you don't think, what, I'll probably ask my family or ask a friend, someone who might know about this stuff. You don't think that, but you should. It's always better to reach out to those you really have in your capacity, because one, they help you quickly. I actually asked him last minute. He was like, "You want me to create an app in 2 days?" I was like, "Yes," and we did. So it worked out. But just really think about the people you have to your accessibility, your mentors, your family, friends, and use them in any way possible because they could actually help you tremendously.
I agree with everything that everyone said. And I would also just say have fun because your passion really shows in your paper. For me, I had a personal connection to my paper and I discussed it. Like I focus on meditation because I meditated in middle school and it was helpful. So that personal connection, like always remember the motive that you have for conducting the project. And also remember to follow the rubric because at one point I just sort of got lost that I realized I forgot to mention my issue, which was mental health in my research paper. So that's another one I would have.
Excellent. Thank you for all of that good advice, to ask for help, to have fun, to check the rubric. And Swarnav, can you share an example of one of those one more questions that you asked that was really productive?
Well, that there's multiple examples of it, but one of the best ones. So in my paper, we ended up actually getting a installation. We were demoing it at the Westchester Knicks Stadium in White Plains. The reason that project even came through was because I asked one specific more question. When we were doing an installation, I believe that was also through QLI. I don't remember who specifically, but my science teacher and my mentor throughout the entire process, once we got the Yorktown High School installation done, at that point I was saying, hey, is there any chance we can do a basketball stadium? Because one of the things that I wanted to do was install it in Madison Square Garden. It was not feasible to get that far. There's things like liability and things, all of that went over my head at that age. And I still don't understand it today, particularly other than outside of the word. But I remember asking my teachers and my mentors about, could we do something bigger? Could we do it in Madison Square Garden at some point? Because we've proven it's working here. Long story short, someone reaches out to another person, and then we end up finding a way to connect into the Westchester Knicks, and they invited us to a game, gave us tickets, and we got to see the Knicks lose. And I got an installation done, and that's still a picture I hang in my bedroom, and I get to see every single morning. So that's the extreme of what one more question could do. Because if it's in your mind, ask someone, and serendipity occurs when you do so.
Incredible. Thank you, panelists. Before we go to the small group and the breakout rooms, do you have any questions for your fellow panelists that you'd like to ask?
I'm definitely curious about Samantha's project, and as well as yours, Winona. I guess for both of you in this case, when you were approaching that stage, when the idea formed, how different was that from what you ended up actually building and delivering? How different was the initial idea in your head, and what was the outcome?
Yeah, it was different because of the feasibility. So I think at one point I wanted to test out meditation on academic performance, and at my age you just can't do that. Like look at everyone's data and grades. And I also had a partner, so we had to negotiate what we wanted to study. But yeah, as long as like picking the independent variable, I would say that part stayed the same.
How did you navigate that change? Because that's a huge difference in my eyes.
Yeah, we asked for a lot of help, and with like Samantha said, use your resources. You're a high school teacher. I had a high school research teacher that was amazing and helped me navigate it. And I remember making a flow chart with a Sharpie marker. I don't know, it was like 2 years ago and I still remember.
And
Can you just
Samantha?
remind me of the question so I know how to answer?
from the day that you had the idea, which is, as Winona said, it's usually big and ambitious, well outside of our capability zone for that time, or at least in the time frame. I wouldn't say capability. How different was that from the end product or project that you ended up implementing? And how did you
Yeah,
cope with that?
that question was stressing me out because it just brought back a memory that actually when I started QLI, I had a whole different project in mind. I actually changed my project in my topic in like December, and that whole flip of project was flipping me out. I was like, oh my God, it's too late. Never mind. Everything's done. I felt so miserable. But when it came to implementing my new idea, at first I was also worried because when I was dealing with foster children and I wasn't sure how to get information about that because I can't interview foster children. There's a whole lot around that as well. Like you said, like when we think it's so easy, a lot of things when it comes to the project is easier said than done. Like, okay, I'm doing a project on foster kids. Who knows better than foster kids? I'll go interview foster kids. That's how it feels like. But then, oh no, there's paperwork. There's people you need to ask permission for. It's a lot of things going on. And also with implementing, how do I make a difference with these foster youth? But to navigate it really, like Winona said, I definitely went to my teacher. I'm pretty sure most of you guys are familiar with COVAT. I had COVAT for like 4 years for all my classes in high school, actually. So I love COVAT dearly. Yeah, she helped guide me a lot, but also one day I really sat down with myself and just looked at my topic. I just looked at it, I stared at it, and I was trying to understand what was I trying to achieve. I feel like when you kind of narrow down, what do I want to get done first? Because we know what we want to achieve in general, but like I said before, baby steps, what is the first step to achieving what I want to achieve in whole, if that makes sense? How do I take those steps? So I think by breaking down my goal, it helped me kind of figure out what to focus on for now, because if anything, I could implement all these bigger ideas later on once I have the foundation.
I think that actually like leads me to like my next question is, how do you get through those, or how did you guys get through those, I guess the mountains and the valleys of getting through any project, the stressful nights where you're like, this is not working right now. I need to change something, otherwise this is not getting completed and submitted. And you're sending a disappointing, pretty depressing email back going, I'm dropping out of this program. What moved you through that? Because like I know I personally had multiple come to Jesus kind of moments where I was like, okay, well, Madison Square Garden's not happening. What can we do, and how do we fight through those? Because every time you understand these barriers, it's another challenge to cross through, and you fight through multiple of them up until the end, and it's painful going through it, and it's great when you look back and we can laugh about it. But what were your guys' experiences like? I'm curious.
Samantha? Or okay. Yeah, it was definitely very stressful at some points, like very stressful, very late nights sometimes. But you just know that eventually you will reach that point where you have to submit it, just be set, like feel accomplished about what you have done so far. And I would say, like, choose that idea and just stick with it, even if it seems like it might not work out. Because like, I think I wanted to do like a 6-week mindfulness meditation intervention that was just not feasible. The timeline wasn't. In terms of the competition, just know that the judges are very reasonable. They know that you don't have that much time to do, just change the whole world, and focus locally at first. And if you can, and you have time, then expand on it.
Yeah, and also I think when we start working on our projects, or as the deadline approaches, we start going really hard. We're working super hard. We're focused on the paper. It feels like the world is kind of revolving around this project right now. And it's like, sometimes you need to remind yourself, like, hold on, take a breath. I'm like 17 in high school in Brooklyn. You just gotta bring yourself back down to earth. Sometimes we could get so caught up in our projects. It feels like life or death. Or for me, it felt like I'm not gonna make a difference. And that really hurt me because I wanted to help these foster youth. But I think once you remind yourself, one, like Winona said, the judges are very reasonable. That's another thing. You would think we're going on Shark Tank or something, but in reality, they honestly really understand what you're working with and what you have to do. So don't put too much pressure on yourself. It's not life or death. You're not a failure. I think we start to beat ourselves up when we get stressed, but it's like, one, take a break. What I would do is like, okay, I'll treat myself to one episode of my show, use some ice cream, a little some, get my mind off the paper so I could come back with a fresh mind. You guys have probably heard this from teachers, like maybe when you finish a paper, take a break and go back. So when you read it through, you have a fresh mind and you can notice stuff you didn't notice. With that, you could do that in the middle of your papers too. You don't have to do it when it's done. In the middle of writing my paper, I did that a lot. I took a lot of breaks. I watched a lot of episodes. But at the end of the day, it's because I needed to be reminded that it's okay. You know, the world will not end if I don't achieve everything that I wanted to achieve with this project right now. So just don't put too much pressure on yourself and treat yourself for what you've already accomplished, I feel like.
What kind of ice cream? Mine's Rocky Road or just plain vanilla. It's basic, but it gets the job done for me.
I'm a cookie dough. I'm a cookie dough type of girl.
Yeah.
And we are cookie dough. Okay. All right.
Oreo.
So
Yeah.
Oreo. Okay. McFlurries also do really great from McDonald's. So if you have one nearby, walk to one. But I guess like
Swarnav, do you have another follow-up?
No, if we have to move on, I can talk for the next 5 hours. I'm interested in what they did.
Well, we don't want to make everybody too hungry. Yes, go ahead, Samantha.
Just to Swarnav and Winona, because I also seen that someone asked a question about the judges. Before we head into that, I wanted to ask about your experiences going before the judges for the first time. Because for me, once again, I literally felt like I was on Shark Tank, and I was just so nervous. So I just wanted to see if you guys experienced the same thing. Were you guys confident at that time? How you guys felt before your presentation?
Yeah, I was also very nervous. So what happened was that day, so my parents drove me out and we got there like 2 hours early, but then we were going second, but the like contestant before us wasn't here yet. So then I thought I would have 2 hours to sit there and relax. But then they were like, would you mind going first? So we were like, okay, because we wanted to help the first contestant. So then we get to the room and we realized now looking back, we practiced it so much that like practiced it to the point where like my partner knew my footsteps and like knew where to go, where I was pointing, and that would just remember that like you practiced and you'll be fine. But I also wanted to mention that I was one of those people that scroll through the QLI website and looked at all of the past winners and was like, oh God, how am I gonna, like, this is like, especially your project, because yours was the one, Samantha, yours was the one right before me. And I was like, this girl created an app. She's amazing. I'm nothing. Like, just don't be that person and compare yourself to those other projects. And just remember, you're making a difference, even if it's a small difference.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to put it. But yeah, in my case, I was definitely extremely nervous. I always do before any kind of like public speaking kind of thing. And the judges were definitely one of my first events where I was freaking out before I had to go up. But again, like Winona said, if you practice it enough, it's just a muscle memory. And once you start to get those first couple of words out, then it flows. And the judges aren't there to judge you, albeit they're called that. They want to see you succeed. They want to see all of you succeed. It's not about first place, last place, or anything of that nature. In fact, their job is harder than yours. And in that sense, they have to pick one of the amazing projects that you guys have worked on. So go up there with the confidence, knowing that they're there to celebrate you and support you in the hard work you've done and not judge you. And that definitely helped me feel a lot more comfortable when I walked off, finishing the questions and the Q&A period. And some of those judges I still stay in touch with today. So that's probably the best thing, is that context that they're not there to judge you, they're there to celebrate you. And if you practice enough, then it's just like muscle memory. Once you go in through that first sentence, everything will just flow naturally and you'll feel great.
I actually do want to talk about a question that someone asked in my breakout room that I feel like was a good question. And Swarnav and Winona, you can actually answer if you'd like. They asked, how do we balance schoolwork, our social life, and the project at the same time? You see how you guys smiled? I smiled too, because I was like, wow. And basically what I said was, for me, that was a time where I figured out that I really do need to discipline my time. I can't spend too much time focusing on one. If I give my day to my social life, I don't do my homework or I don't do my project. So what I would do is, let's say it's like Monday, I have class. After class, I'll hang out with my friends for a little bit, let's say like an hour or two. Then I'll do my homework. So at least my homework's out the way, because I don't want to be working on my project and be like, oh snap, I have a whole essay to do. But then once my homework was finished, then I would work on my project, stress-free, satisfied with the day, just able to focus on my project. So do you guys have any advice on like basically time management during working on the project?
I mean, for me, I think the time blocking thing that you're talking about, I was saying like, hey, these times of the day are when I'm going to work on things. I had a bad habit of procrastinating. So the time blocking thing is hugely valuable.
I will be completely honest and say sometimes I didn't have a balance. So that just that's something I'm still working on. And I wouldn't say I regret some things in high school because I love where I am now, but when you get older, you'll look back and be like, why did I spend more time on my social life? But the thing I try to remember is that if you're like really sleep deprived or you're just really stressed, when you do your work, you spend a longer time low quality and then you have to go back and fix it. So it's more inefficient. So try to remember that. Yeah.
So students, you are invited to either raise your hand to unmute and ask a question, or you can type it into the chat. If your mic is not working, you can type your question for our panelists into the chat. You have them for a few more minutes, right? They're here very generously giving us their time and wisdom. Maybe it would also help current students if you simply shared where you are in your project. What section are you currently working on? You can type that into the chat so our panelists can give you a little bit more targeted advice. I see Chloe's hand is up. Chloe, what is your question?
I just want to know, like, how do you decipher like which implementation option is the best option?
The most feasible one that you're most passionate about. Yeah, it's short answer, but
I agree. For me, it felt like what was achievable at the time. Because like we keep mentioning, we tend to think big. And it's like, what can I achieve right now, this week, this month? Just so you're not overwhelming yourself. I think when it comes to implementation, it's also kind of important to get out your comfort zone. For me, before WISE, actually, I did not like talking to people. I don't want to interview anybody, nothing. I was very quiet. So at the time when I did come up with my implementation, I was like, an app is a great way to reach a lot of people without having to talk to them directly. So that also ended up working out for me because I got to stay within my comfort zone. So that too, you can also think about what are you comfortable with in the moment. If eventually, you feel like, okay, now I feel like now I'm definitely comfortable enough going to agencies and speaking to foster youth about that for sure. But also do what you're comfortable with at the time with your implementation. And like Winona said, what is achievable at that moment with what you have, with the resources you have.
Yeah, I think there's nothing more to add but reiterate that it's whatever is feasible given the resources you have and the time you have. I think those are the two constraints you really need to think about before making a decision. Maybe just write it out. What's going to take, what resources and how much time do you think it's going to take? One thing I will say is our minds are very good at lying to ourselves at how much time something's going to take. So whatever you think it's going to take, just add a little bit of extra time to it, and it'll help you significantly in deciding which implementation plan's best for you.
Good question, Chloe. Other questions that you can either ask directly or again, you can type it into the chat. And they can be specific to just your project. So if you wanted to maybe give an example of a few implementations that you were considering, you do have experts here who have, implemented their projects. And we learned earlier today from them that it's a good idea to ask for advice and ask for help. You've got it here.
Also, again, while we wait, because I actually just pulled up my paper. I literally still have a copy of my paper. And I think one section that we didn't talk about, or sometimes we choose not to talk about it, is definitely financial implications. Because with writing my paper, like that was the last section I wanted to do because it's a lot to think about. So, to my fellow panelists, do you guys have any advice about how you went about your financial implications? How did you think about, what did you have to think about, what financial implications your project might have?
I haven't looked at my paper in a while. But if you could remind me on the financial implications, was that the amount we had to put in to try and pull it off, or the financial implications if we're successful? I think it was the former, right?
The former, I believe.
Yeah. So in the case of mine, I needed a lab to be able to actually build the tiles that I was working on. We were working with a lot of materials that you can't just find off the shelf, and you could only find these in university labs. So the way I had to go about it was literally emailing every professor that had the facilities to be able to fabricate these devices. And it got to a point where I was fortunate enough to work in Georgia Tech and get into their lab. And it comes back to that same premise or thesis of just keep asking questions, because eventually serendipity will support you. You ask enough people the same question, you'll get 50 different answers, and somehow it'll lead you to the next thing. At least that's what I've seen so far. But other than that, in terms of financial implications, definitely trying to find lab equipment to be able to build what you want to build before you can test it is definitely a big challenge. So I'm sure that was the biggest part of trying to navigate how to draft that section, because it was a full journey just to be able to get built, because I can't afford to rent a lab.
So for me, my financial implication was how do I fund my portable meditation kit, and what do I have to put in it? Because yes, I've meditated before, but I am certainly not an expert, and just I don't know how to phrase this, but I guess know your place in terms of like how much knowledge you have. Because so I was just a high school student, and there are definitely like professional mindfulness practitioners out there that you can contact, well, specific to your project. But I contacted several people to tell me what is important to help people meditate, and also how much money can I raise in, let's say, a month. And before, like, just, I don't know if this would help anyone relieve their stress, but my money wasn't fully funded, and like when I submitted my paper. Actually, it was not even like, it was barely funded, I believe. So think big, but also feasible, and have fun.
Also know that there's a webinar that WISE provides on doing your financial implications. And if you have any questions, of course, you could always call Juliet at WISE. And if you could work with another teacher in your school building or a mentor. So there are resources that you could reach out to help you develop your financial implications section. I think the most important thing here is that you learn to use those resources and to find others, because no matter what you do in life, it's having others involved that helps to make whatever you're doing stronger and very often better.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, speaking of resources, I do think for my financial implications, I had actually went to my experts. I do believe we had to have like a minimum of 3 experts, I believe. And I went to them and I was like, in creating this program, or, what I'm trying to accomplish, what do you recommend that I do? What are things that I'm probably not seeing or I'm missing out on? And they helped me think of kind of all the possible things that will go into this project, which is why, like, with all of us, the panelists, your teachers, we really emphasize resources, because other people will see what you don't see. And they helped me realize things I was not thinking about that would have costed me money. So you could also definitely ask your experts for advice throughout your paper. You don't have to just interview them and keep it pushing. I suggest that you hold your experts close to you, because they may come help you with the rest of the parts of your paper too.
Timmy and Winona, and maybe Swarnav, you'll remember too, who were your experts? Meaning, what kind of jobs did they have? What kind of experience did they have? How'd you find them? Who were the experts for your topics?
Yeah, I don't think I met Michael Wazowski at that time, Phyllis, but I think I met him after. He's still someone I call today. I have to catch up with him as well. But at that time, it was my science research teacher, Michael Blueglass, the man of the hour, that our assistant principal that got me into QLI, John Gallis. He was instrumental. So it wasn't a single individual. It was almost like, again, it was like a village that effectively helped make this project even work or a reality in the first place. It wasn't just me. And I think that's the biggest importance I would take away from like the mentor kind of question, is that everyone has something that they can teach you. And the only way you're going to learn that is if you go and ask questions to people and ask for help. Even if you don't think you fully need help, just talk with people, because everyone has stories and experiences that might help you find a solution to a challenge you didn't even think they'd be able to help you with. But Michael Blueglass was huge. John Gallis was huge. My mentors down at Georgia Tech, Wenzuo and Zhongling Wang, those guys were amazing and instrumental. They taught me a lot of calculus and chemistry that I didn't learn in class. But those were probably the biggest people in my influence of circle directly during the project. And then obviously Phyllis and Michael Wazowski are the 2 people that I try to stay in touch with going forward ever since.
Mine was the certified yoga practitioner, like I mentioned before. There was a teacher at my school who had gone on a mindfulness retreat, the principal of my school, and my research paper. And I am not someone, even right now, I am not the most comfortable with sending a million emails. because when it comes to me, it's like, I know I'm more than willing to help anyone who needs help. But then when it comes to the other way around, it's so much harder. So that part definitely puts you out of the comfort zone. But then they were super nice and super helpful. I learned a lot from the journey.
I think that's very important, Winona, to even say that you had a journey that helped to change your life, that helped to give you confidence, that really lifted you up. That too is a huge benefit that you'll have for the rest of your life. Very nice.
Also on the topic of experts, I do think WISE had a workshop for experts. First of all, I think WISE had a workshop for everything because there was also never a moment where I felt underprepared or kind of like things catch me by surprise when it came to the project. Because I do remember with COVID especially, like literally for one of our Saturdays that we were working together, all of us just sitting there eating donuts, finding experts. And I think, I forgot how we conducted it. For mine, obviously you find experts with your topic. I think she had to look through LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great place to find anybody for some reason. It's great. It's the best social network there is. So I do think I found most of my experts on LinkedIn. And mine were two professors with like PhDs in social work, and Letitia James, who is, she's a politician. She's actually, I think she's the attorney general right now. So that was actually great. And I do major in law. So I actually did stay in touch with her for my project and for me wanting to become a lawyer. So that was great. That's why I say hold your experts close to you, because also it could become a potential mentorship, you know? But I do think I literally found all of them on LinkedIn or when you're doing your research, you know, at the end where they're like, you know, quoting the other papers in the bibliography. I do this a lot. It's like a cheat code for me. In the bibliography of other papers, I check to see what papers did they credit to, and then I'll reach out to those authors because, you know, obviously they were an inspiration to this person who wrote this amazing paper that I'm looking at. So, you know, try to use bibliography. They could actually be a good source of information, or they might lead you to papers that might help you even more with your project.
And I think it's also important to consider your community's government agencies, whether it's the borough president, a city council person, but those resources, the borough president's office, for example, has very often helped QLI students. City council members have helped them. Other school principals and teachers help students who are doing QLI. So it's really to think about. And if you can't think of someone, call WISE.
On that note, I'm going to put our contact information in the chat right now. So you'll have my email, you'll have our phone number. If you have any questions after the event, if you have a question right now, you can email. And if you would like to be put in touch with some of our panelists, please feel free to reach out and I'll ask them on your behalf if they may get in touch with you as well. Okay. Phyllis, since you are with us today and you've seen 26 years of QLI projects that are successful, do you have any advice for students this year and what you've seen time after time, perhaps, on what makes a project successful, or advice for how to even shape that project and finish this daunting challenge?
Well, the first piece of advice I have is that when you do your paper, you're ready to submit it, to please count the number of citations. You are responsible to have one primary source, and you need to have 7 other sources, secondary sources. You could have more than one primary source, but you must have at least one. So you need to go through it and check to see that you have at least 8 citations, and they have to be 8 different citations, 8 different sources that you reached out to, that you secured information to do your background research or your research. So I think that would be my number one recommendation. And the reason for that is that many proposals, you know, we do count the citations. We go through each proposal to make sure that they meet the guidelines and the requirements for the proposal. So very often a proposal will just have 7, and that proposal has to be set aside and cannot be judged going further. So please do check. So that's number one. Number two, I would have more than one person read my proposal and see if they have any recommendations on the writing, the organization. 3, when you write the proposal, each section needs to have a heading. So if you're doing the background, for example, that section, you need to have a heading that says background, and that helps the judge your paper, because when they use the rubric, they have to rate your background section. They need to rate your research section. So do follow the recommended sequence that we give you in the student guide. And then have fun with this project, because you won't ever forget it. You won't forget that you've done it, because it really does, I think, change lives. I meet young people who are now adults and they did a QLI project. And the first thing I do is talk to them, particularly if I knew a particular individual who, and the project that they did, we talk about the project. Use your project, if you're proud of it, in your letter or your essay when you go to college. Because many of the QLI students get an acceptance letter, and in the letter, it says, we were particularly impressed with your QLI project. And so use it as something that would help you to stand out, because whatever you've done, most applicants, probably no other applicant has done. And I think, you know, just be proud, because if you finish the QLI project, you're a winner. And thank you very much for coming to this webinar.